I hadn't anticipated that so many new people would be here. New meaning people who haven't been here before. And I hope what is being said will make some sense. In the beginning, I had planned to speak to a couple of sentences of a letter received a while ago. We will wait. The letter starts out, this letter was a long time in coming, but here it is. Due to my own uncertainty and fears of working without a safety net, I feel the need to return to a more traditional approach to spiritual growth. Spiritual growth is put in quotation marks. The need to pass that koan will not let me proceed in any other direction at the present time. I just feel so unfinished. The reason that this letter was picked is that it expresses what probably all of us feel at one time or another, or most of the time, and what we feel we need to do about it. Due to my own uncertainty and fears of working without a safety net, I must return to something more traditional. Why is it that it is so hard to be with one's fears and uncertainties, and rather find a safety net, knowing, in case of this person, and maybe in case of all of us, to some extent or other, that this means entanglement, unfreedom, caughtness. A net is something one gets caught up in. That is what the image presents. Why is it so horrendously difficult to face one's everyday fears and uncertainties as they are, to meet them firsthand, and rather than do that, look for safety nets, traditions, shelteredness, guidance, authority. belonging, following. One reason is that we've never done it. We don't give it a chance. We're so convinced that we must not feel pain and anxiety, that it is bad for us, that we will fall apart if we come in touch with it. And rather submit to what? Anything, almost. Anything to make us feel at ease and certain and safe. This person writes, I feel so unfinished. Maybe if I passed a koan, I would feel finished. A koan is a very methodical spiritual practice which comprises a whole system of discipline, of physical exercise, method, questioning a word on each exhalation, not knowing the answer, submitting to strenuous discipline and striving to get what? A promised enlightenment experience, which one has read about, heard about. One has read that if there's enlightenment, all problems fall off, one feels free. Wisdom and compassion will come into being. So rather than staying with this present state of feeling unfinished, discontented, anxious and fearful, one submits to a method, to a system, to get someplace, hoping to feel different, not realizing and not noticing how the mind and body gets conditioned in the process. Even if an experience is reached or attained, the mind has become conditioned. And at that point, one is told one has just taken a first step. Now one has to take many more steps to get more enlightenment, deeper enlightenment, fuller or full enlightenment. It's endless. Why do we do this work? Why does one sit become quiet, motionless? Is it to think of what one needs to attain and to strive for that? Or is it to become, for the first time maybe in one's entire life, aware of what's actually going on in this body-mind from moment to moment? unless that takes place, one will carry one's unresolved fears and boredoms and anxieties and feelings of unfinishedness and insufficiency all along. There's nothing that will resolve it, no one who will take it away from one or give one something in its stead. It carries it with one, unawares, and yet it bubbles up. At any moment that the safety net shows holes and cracks, if one looks at the world situation, what is going on in all the many countries throughout the world, everywhere people are being told what to think, what to believe, and it is so easy to accept that rather than to look and think for oneself. And yet to look and think for oneself may bring pain and uncertainty, restlessness. Can one live with that and look at it? Does one see the need for becoming aware of how we live actually from one moment to the next? Does one realize that one doesn't know? That one constantly lives in words and thoughts and ideas about who one is, what one should become, what other people are like? What is the truth of this moment? What is the truth of my momentary life? Not what somebody told me I am or should be, but what am I this moment? Nobody can tell me. I have to see and look and listen for myself. How do I do it? How can I go about it? From almost the day we are born, we are told what we are, how we are, what we should be. And the genuine moods and feelings that little children have very often are criticized or squashed, labeled as bad or good. So early, a little child grows into this world of language and thoughts and ideas and images and is completely out of touch what it actually feels and experiences. We want certainty and security. And where do we look for it? We look for it in other people who are uncertain and afraid and anxious themselves. We share that with all human beings, fear and the want for security. It's such a fundamental human condition, irrespective how similar or dissimilar we may be superficially. Fundamentally, human beings are afraid and in want. wanting something all the time. Something better, something safer, something more pleasurable, something less painful. Throughout the world. And the fear of not getting it, and the fear of what one is stuck with. Wanting something to get out of what one finds oneself in, or doesn't find oneself in, one doesn't look at it. What is it? Is it possible to face uncertainty? How does one go about it? How does one go about facing anything? Fear or pain? Suffering? Can it be done at all as long as one looks for escape elsewhere? For remedy? Usually, when we look at anything, other people or ourselves, there's always the idea of how it should be different, how it should be otherwise, how someone else should not be the way he is. She should be kinder or more generous, more loving. How is one? How is this other person actually when one drops all ideas and all judgments of what oneself or the other should be like? Is that possible? Is that humanly possible? To have or come upon an awareness that is completely free of judgment, completely free of wish or want for what is being looked at to be any different than what it is. It's a fundamental question. Is it possible to look at oneself as one is this moment without the stirring of a want to be different, to be otherwise? Realizing and understanding that as long as that wish to be different is active, one cannot look, one cannot be in touch with the truth of this moment. And in wondering whether this is possible, to see all the ideas, all the resistances, or whatever comes up, rather than just this silent, quiet openness to what is actually there. Not knowing what is there, one doesn't. All one knows is ideas, words, memories, wishes, wants. But without that, what is there? A moment ago, I called it fear because that was the word that came up. It was the memory that suggested the fear. But if I put the memory and the word fear aside, what is there? If I don't know it, and yet fully open to meet it, to let it unfold. Reveal itself for the first time. That's a new state of being. We've never done it because we've been afraid. We've been trained to get remedies, to look for escapes, to distract ourselves from what is unpleasant. frightening, painful. Usually, in coming back from an off period, a time when I'm not here in Rochester, about to give another talk, the feeling comes up, I should say something different, something new. People must be fed up with hearing the same thing over and over again. And then in letting this feeling do its thing, thinking of all the things that people bring up when they come to talk, and all the things one observes when one is with people, it is always the same problems. The problems don't change. Whether one is here or in another city or in another country, with this group of people or different kinds of people, always the same problems. Fear, want, uncertainty, and wanting to make things certain and secure, and constantly failing at doing it, and yet never giving up in this effort, and rarely, if ever, quietly opening up to what is actually there. So, this feeling of talking about something new or different, it's a misleading thing. It's also a conditioned feeling. It is also a movement away from what actually is, because to look at what is there, and no inspiration is needed when I see the utter necessity of doing it. The utter necessity of living in truth and not deceiving oneself, or looking for escapes and safety nets. So in sitting down, maybe once a day or whenever, can it take place, this unfolding of what is there in utter stillness and quietness, of no interference? Seeing the urge to interfere come up and letting it abate. Because the moment one sees something, actually it does not continue. It's interrupted. It is found out. It is detected. Giving immense space to what's there, which means not this compulsion, I must now attend to it. She said something like that, now let me try it, I must attend to this. This is again wanting something to happen, having already an idea that this must be done with a result in mind. The awareness that is being talked about has no momentum of thought behind it, no motive. It's something is there. And when something is there, why separate from it? Why escape from it? Why deny it or suppress it? Then it works underground. We all know that. When one says, I feel so unfinished, what is that? Unfinished, or one may say, I feel so insufficient, so incomplete, so lacking. What makes one say that? I think all of us feel that way at times, or most of the time, or all of the time. What is going on that formulates this sentence, I feel so unfinished, so incomplete? Is there comparison going on with someone who seems to be so much more together, so much more finished, or adequate, competent? Can one see how comparison immediately brings about this feeling? And again, not being with what is, but the mind dwelling on an image of someone else being more perfect, more finished, or what one has read about somebody, passing a koan, having an enlightenment experience. The comparison of the idea with that, with this vague feeling about oneself. What is oneself if one doesn't compare? If one refuses to compare oneself with any other person or with any idea about what one could be or should be, is that possible? Not to compare? If one wasn't comparing at all, could one possibly say, I feel unfinished? Does one say it because one has been told so many times in one's previous years how ineffective or inadequate one is? Again, having been compared by other people with other children, other adolescents, other students, other workers. Is it possible to put all comparison aside, seeing what comparison does? That it is a mind process which heavily affects the whole state of being? And being finished, what is that other than an idea? Being complete. There's only human beings who have constantly nourished this ideal of perfectionism. Because we have this ability to imagine something like perfection. This is a sheer product of imagination. There is no such thing as perfectionism in nature. It's a product of human fantasy. And out of comparison with what we vaguely perceive in ourselves, and this idea of perfection, there comes this state of discontent, insufficiency, and then wanting something, and subscribing to methods to get it. As long as the fear and the want exist, there will be methods offered to help us out of it. Safety nets. An entanglement which never helps to really see what is. A while ago, somebody asked this question. How does love come into this work? Is what the person asked. It was sort of a three-part question. How does love come into this work? What is its true nature? And how does one give it full expression? This work referring to questioning, looking, listening to what is actually going on within oneself and one's relationship to others. Trying to discover the truth of oneself and of one's relationship with others, with the world. How does love come into this work? What is its true nature? And how does one give it full expression? Today I went to a store to buy a card. A niece of ours who lives in Switzerland had gotten married, and we wanted to send her a card. But it was impossible to pick any of the cards. The word love was just splattered all over the place. I think it would be very worthwhile for all of us to look at how this word love is used by ourselves and by others in our everyday life, in the movies, in the plays. Actually, we use it almost as though we hoped that the word itself would do something. Parents say to their children, "I love you," and teach their children to say, "I love you." What does it mean? What does it mean, this expression, falling in love with someone? Can one look at that quietly? Whether this word really expresses something or covers something up. Whether what we call loving could be better described factually for what it is. Sexual intimacy, sexual pleasure, pleasure of tenderness is what it is. Why call it love? I'm not attacking it, I'm wondering about it. Why do we use that word? What are we trying to do by using the word? We feel that love is a very special thing happening between two people. One feels close, attracted, attached to someone, and calls that love. At the same time, there is tremendous urge to possess that person, to make that person secure for oneself, to keep him or her for oneself. And if this does not work out, if it goes awry, if the person will not stay attached to one, then the love turns into hate, jealousy, disappointment, anguish, fear. Very often parents, one has the feeling, try to tie their children to them by saying I love you and making the child say back I love you, just teaching that. This is being taught, hoping that through this word there will be a bond, a security bond, that one will not lose each other. But does love have anything to do with a fear of loss? It does. That's the way we feel about it. The moment there is this attachment to a person, one says one has fallen in love or one loves this person, there's the fear of losing that person. You see that? And one wants to make sure it doesn't happen. And with that, all kind of things happen that have nothing to do with a loving relationship. There's manipulation and anger when it doesn't work, which has nothing to do with love. Love might not even have anything to do with a specific personal relationship, because does love have anything to do with possessiveness, with ownership, with fear of loss? When we think we love somebody, how much thought is involved in the relationship, how much imagination and fantasy, imagery of what this person means to one. Very often the image is not of the person directly. The person directly is not an image. He or she is what he or she is from moment to moment. And that very often does not go along with the image we have of the person we love, and there's disappointment. Because the person actually live does not conform to the image that we love. So we love an image of a person, not the person himself or herself. And very often relationship is nothing but the struggle and battle to make people conform to each other's images, which is wrought with frustration from the outset. No one wants to be changed by the other. Now this person didn't ask, what is love in relationship? He says, how does love come into this work? Into this work of looking at what one is actually like from moment to moment, what one's relationship is actually like, not how one expresses it in words and images, but what it actually is. To look at the real thing, how one talks with each other, how one manipulates or plays games, to let this come into the light of day without embarrassment or cover-up. And to discover how self-centered we are most of the time, almost all of the time. Always wanting things to be what I need, what I must have. what is my right, my dream, my future. And the other person feels exactly the same way, and very rarely do these two things coalesce. And then there's bitter struggle or disappointment or tension and stress. Is it possible that in this work of looking at what actually is going on in oneself and our relationship with each other, is there a possibility for love? Love not in the sense of wanting things to go my way, according to my dream, my wishes, but to begin to understand the truth of each moment without immediately wanting to remedy, to interfere, to change, to run away. To observe all of this vastly, widely, without any judgment. What is love? Can it possibly be there as long as there is fear and want? Or is this mutually exclusive? Fear and want can never bring about love. Where there's fear and want, there cannot be love. And is it humanly possible to be free of fear and want? We don't know. One cannot postulate this or hold it out as a promise. But one can question it. And can, in the process of seeing fear and want with a mind that does not judge, does not condemn or accept, with a mind that is free to look and to listen and to be, can love come into being? One wants to imagine that it is there to be found, or that it is in every human being, or that it is outside some place where we could pray for it or search for it. But that's all fantasy, that's all the process of thought and imagination. And yet, in a moment in which there's no self-stirring, fear is seen and want is seen for what it is, allowed to unfold and allowed to melt away. Is love created in such a moment? Does it come into being? Yet the moment that the want comes up to keep it, to hold it, or the fear of losing it, it's gone, it's finished. This creative moment is finished. Because then the drive to be secure or the fear of being insecure takes over. And that is without love. So in looking at oneself or in relating to people in an openness that is listening to what is actually happening, looking, finding out, can love awaken in this process? Only if one does not look for results, effects, rewards, nor escape from any pain that may be involved. This person here asked, how does one give love full expression? The question assumes that it's there, and because it's there, one has to give it expression. This is an idea. When love is functioning within a human being, it does not need to be given expression. It expresses itself in a relationship that is free of fear and free of wanting rewards, wanting assurances. Wanting promises, wanting security. Free of that. The expression of love is not to fear and not to want. Just spreading. We're very much concerned about expression, about self-expression. Expressing ourselves artistically or professionally. What is it that wants to express itself? If we look at it, we're very much encouraged in school and through the media and papers and all kinds of psychological processes to express ourselves. It is the self, as the word goes, it's the self that seeks to express itself, to express its fears and pleasures and wants and longings and yearnings. To fulfill itself, to feel gratified or satisfied, or to feel itself as existing. But that's not the expression of love. Love does not hanker after expression. I don't know why. It just functions in relationship or without relationship, without wanting either to express itself or to feel itself, to assure itself. It is what it is. is free from any need or urgency. And the moment one tries to hold on to it, or capture it, or keep it, it's gone. Because that is the activity of the self. We'll end here for tonight.